Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm here with several members of the team this morning. We have Kim Brandel, Ricky Kirkham, K.R. Patel. All of us are here in Redmond on the call, and also we have several other speakers in other locations. So we're going to get started with the usual approach here. Kim's going to go over a couple of logistical details, and then we're going to kick off the presentations.
Perfect. Thanks, Doug. Welcome, everybody, to the June community call for Office add-ins. First, just a few logistical things. This is a monthly call. It happens the second Wednesday of every month. So if you don't already have the recurring meeting invite, you can download it with this link. The next call after today will be second Wednesday of the month, as usual. And for those of you who haven't joined us today, the Office add-ins calls are simply a chance for you to meet some of the members of the product team that are behind the Office add-ins APIs and platform, and to learn a little bit about what's new, what's coming soon. We typically try to cover a variety of topics on each call and do at least one deep dive or kind of go deeper on one topic per call. And then it's also a chance for you to connect with us directly for Q&A. So we publish a form ahead of time. I'll be showing that link later where you can submit your questions ahead of time, or you can submit your questions here. Feel free to type them in the chat window and we'll address them either as they come up or at the end of each section or at the end of the call, or alternatively, whatever we don't get to, we always cover in the blog post that we publish to recap the call. So we have a packed agenda today. We're going to start with an Office add-ins overview like we always do, just to kind of level set for those folks who may be new to Office add-ins. K.R. is here to talk a little bit about Build 2019 and recap some great announcements from that. I'll give you an update about Microsoft Edge WebView. We've had some information about that over the last few months, and we have a GA announcement now for that. Joe's here to talk about working with Excel in Microsoft Graph. We're also going to talk a little bit about docs tips and tricks, so getting the most out of the documentation, some things you may not know about working with the docs, and Ricky's here to share that with us. And lastly, we have a customer here with us today. Andrew Hall from Analysis Place is going to deliver a presentation about how Office add-ins is used to power their add-in that gives integration between Excel and PowerPoint and Excel and Word. So some cool stuff there ahead. I'm Kim Brandel. You heard from Doug already. Also in the room with me today, K.R. and Ricky. Joe's on the phone and Andrew's on the phone as well. So with that, I'll hand off back to Doug, and he's going to start with a brief Office add-ins overview.
Great, thanks, Kim. So this is just a quick recap of what Office add-ins are for those who are new to building add-ins. So modern Office add-ins are JavaScript-based, so they're just a web app. They're HTML, JavaScript, CSS, use TypeScript if you prefer, and you stand up a web app, and then there is a manifest file. This is a little XML file that's generated by our tooling, and that points at your web app. So key concept here is you have a web app that you maintain just like any other simple web app. It can do whatever you need to do in your app. The manifest file points to it, and then that manifest file allows you to publish it to all the different Office platforms, all the different Office clients. Everywhere that Office runs, your add-in will run. What you can do in an add-in, of course, you can use any web APIs that you like to use in a web app, your own APIs and others. You can hit the Microsoft Graph, and there's opportunities for integration there in various ways. And then there is an Office.js API that wraps around all of the clients. So that's how you get at document content. That's how you compose an email, read and write Excel spreadsheets, and do those sorts of things. So Office.js is where we spend a lot of our time when we're looking at building add-ins. So that's just a quick recap of what Office add-ins are, and when you want to learn more, here's a link that we'll paste in the chat window there, and that's where all the documentation our team maintains is, and Ricky will be talking a little more about that shortly.
Awesome, thanks, Doug. All right, now we have K.R.'s here to talk about build announcements. So K.R., you can go ahead and share your screen.
Hey everyone. So about I think a little less than a month ago, we were at the Build conference in Seattle. Build is our yearly developer conference. And it's back to Steve Ballmer's day saying developers, developers, developers. And so we got to highlight a few announcements, and so just wanted to recap those. The announcements were focused on first Outlook. So within Outlook, we announced that actionable messages were now available on Outlook Mobile. Actionable messages and adaptive cards were announced at Build 2018 a year ago. And now there's a new endpoint. So this is important because it keeps users in their flow, and it allows you as the developer to build customizations exactly where users need it. All right, the next one that we had was around Excel. So as many of you folks know, we've been on a big journey to deliver more and more APIs for Excel JavaScript. And at Build, we announced 500 new APIs for Excel. This was our 1.9 APIs. They are now generally available. And they work through things like shapes, chart types, more workbook events about like inserting them, saving them, closing them, different things. Pivot tables was a big one. And then enabling scenarios around setting up your workbooks to be shared through like the page layout APIs, so you can publish those and for printing or share them with others. We also have over 100 new APIs that are coming, that are in the beta channel or coming soon to the beta channel right now. A couple that are available that we've talked about on previous community calls are comments and slicers. So we encourage you to check those out. The next thing that we announced was Excel Custom Functions. So we announced general availability for Excel Custom Functions on Windows, Mac, Excel Online. This was another feature we previewed about a year ago. And just want to say a big thank you to all our partners who helped us, gave us feedback, tried it out, and asked questions during the preview. You did make the offering a lot better. And then last but not least, the other topic we talked about at Build was the COM to Web Add-in Bridge. So a few months ago, we highlighted the COM to Web Add-in Bridge for Excel. And what this capability allows you to do is it allows your COM add-ins to and your web add-ins to run side by side. On Windows, if your COM add-in is installed, we end up showing that. And the benefit here is you can deploy your web add-ins through centralized deployment to all the hosts, and your users will only see the web add-ins on Mac and Excel Office Online. So at Build, we announced that, hey, this is we announced more broadly that this is available right now. It's available on the Insiders channel. And there's some more information there. One of the things when we were talking about this last month, questions that we got were, hey, when is this going to be available for Word and PowerPoint? So happy to announce it's actually available today on Word and PowerPoint. If you start with the latest Insiders build, you can use these same capabilities for those applications as well. We do plan to add this capability for Outlook. That's still in the backlog. I don't have an update for you there. So that's pretty much it. Those were the recaps around Build 2019. If you want, check out the blog post at this aka.admis link for more details. All right, thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Kare. All right, so next up we have just a quick announcement about Microsoft Edge WebView for Office add-ins. So Sudhir has joined us. For those of you who are regulars on the call, Sudhir, one of the PMs here in Office Platform, has joined us a couple times in recent months to talk about how you as developers could get an early look at the Microsoft Edge WebView control for Office add-ins. And at the time, you had to, be part of the, join the Insiders channel and run on certain versions of Office, et cetera. Now I'm happy to announce recently we've announced GA for the Microsoft Edge WebView control. And this AKAMS link that Doug will paste into the chat momentarily is a link to the blog post. I'm not going to go into detail here because the blog post does a really good job of outlining which platforms it's GA on now and what versions, etc. But check out the blog post. It also has guidance for you as Office add-ins developers in terms of recommendations for what you need to test and that type of thing. So check it out. And as always, if you have any issues with the WebView control or Office.js in general, feel free to log an issue for us in the Office Dev Office-JS repository in GitHub. And Sudhir's likely going to join us probably next month, maybe the month after, to talk in a little bit more detail about plans looking forward for the Edge WebView control. All right, so next up we have Joe joining us from China. He's going to talk about working with Excel and Microsoft Graph. So not directly related to add-ins, but related in the sense that because add-ins are web apps, and oftentimes in your add-in you'll make calls to APIs, REST APIs. Microsoft Graph is just one of those REST APIs that you may use. And so there's some really great capabilities in terms of working with Excel and Microsoft Graph, and Joe's going to talk a little bit about that.
This is Joe from China team that we are working on the Excel Graph. Actually, Excel Graph has a relationship with our Excel add-ins, the web add-ins. We share almost the same code base for the API implementation. This screen, actually, we see is almost the same snapshot that Doug just mentioned. This is the overview for the Microsoft Graph. With the Microsoft Graph services, we could access kinds of resources in Microsoft. For example, for the devices, people, chat, SharePoint, Outlook, or of course, Excel is one of the services that exposed in Microsoft Graph. Currently for the Graph, we supported a bunch of platforms, and also we provided a bunch of SDK tutorials as well. So here are a list of those supported platforms. You could get more details from the Graph website, the Graph website. Here is about the Excel Graph. That this is this Excel service that exposed through the Microsoft Graph services. So it enabled the actions against those Excel workbooks that was stored in SharePoint or OneDrive. And also we provide a rich set of APIs so for different workbook objects. Constantly, it enables us to perform kinds of scenarios. For example, we could perform the calculation, we could store or track data changes, we could generate reports. It's almost like those APIs that was done in the add-ins. For more resources about the graph, you could access the aka.ms/graphs. Here are some APIs that were provided by Excel Graph. We provided kinds of measures and also relationships against different objects. For example, for the workbook, worksheet, table, or ranges. Most of them are actually aligned with our JavaScript APIs. Is an end-to-end call flow for the Excel Graph. The AGS stands for the Microsoft Graph Services. So our service is built on top of the Excel WAC or Excel Online services. So here the request went to the AGS, and then we need to get the WAP token from the host. It's either the SharePoint or OneDrive, and then route the request to the online services. The online services will open the workbook and take actions and save the data. Finally, it will return the data to the graph services and then response to the client side. That's the end-to-end. Actually, for the IDE in Excel 9, it's also follow the way in here in step 5 and step 6. While the API implementation is shared between the Excel Graph and the Excel JavaScript API. Here is some of our practice. So with our experience, how we could make the batch graph usage for customers. For example, we suggested customers to use the session form model, as the session will contain 3 steps. at first it will open the workbook, and then at the second it will take actions, and at last it will close the workbook. As for the session form, so we provided a request to open the workbook. Well, it will retain a workbook session ID. With the session ID for all other requests, we will take this session ID and leverage this session ID for all other requests. With it, it will provide the high performance and also the high reliability. And also we suggest that use the batch request to save the round trip for each individual request. And also we found that the auto-recalc might take pretty much time in our request duration. So we also suggest that disable the auto-recalc on demand in case that you don't need the result after we calculated. And I listed some common errors that we listed in our top errors. So also for the suggested actions. And next, I'm going to show you how we could play with the Excel graph in Graph Explorer. It's pretty simple. This is the Graph Explorer. Before I take actions here, I would like to show you my documents and my SharePoint site. This is all my documents. I will use the book file here as an example to show you how we could use the Excel graph to take actions against this workbook. So at first, I could find this workbook with the SharePoint REST API. I could find the book name here and get the workbook ID. And then I could use the create session. Create session means that, okay, open the workbook for me. So I could use this request to open the workbook, and then I will get the session ID as I just mentioned. So I will. Hey
Joe, sorry to interrupt here. We just lost your screen sharing. Maybe you can share your screen one more time.
Okay, my bad. One moment.
Sure.
Yeah, just let me know if you could see it.
Perfect. We're back online again. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's great. So here is, in case that you missed it, here is a request for the workbook create session. It's used to open the workbook against this target workbook. And I got the session ID from the response. So next, I just want to get, oh, my bad. I just missed the workbook, the ID for the workbook. I have to try it again for the ID here and create a session with, yes. So this, okay. Huh. It seems something wrong happened. Maybe I made a mistake. Okay, I got a wrong ID for the target workbook. Yeah. Yeah. Here is the response that I got from the request, and I copied it down for the ID. So next, I will show all workbooks or all worksheets and this workbook, which means that it's worksheets. And I will use this. I just got and get all worksheets. So as you could see here, we have the two visible sheet 1 and sheet 2, and one hidden sheet. When we switch back to the UI, we could see there are two sheets here. And in sheet 2, there is a table. So we could also use the command here to get the sheet 2 and list all tables. It's a kind of OData protocol. So it follows that the entity object, for example, this is workbook, and this get all worksheets and the workbook, and get the worksheet named as sheet 2, and then get the table all tables and sheet 2. It's pretty like our JavaScript languages. And next, I'd like to add a sheet to this workbook. So I will switch it to post as this is a write request. And I run it. Okay, it will retain the default name as the sheet 3. When we switch back to here, there will be call 3 happened. I'm not sure, maybe this session, this workbook happened since I opened it for pretty long time, so it might be expired. So I need to refresh it. Yeah, this sheet 3 is I just added. So I could add another one, show you the real-time cross-link between the graph and the UI. And I add it again. It shows me that the new sheet name is sheet 4. So we could see here the sheet 4 was just added. Yeah, that's all for my introduce. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. 1 second while I share my screen here.
Sure.
And while I do that, so just, you can imagine, like I said, this is, not directly add-ins related in terms of, using the Graph API. But you can imagine scenarios where, maybe your add-in is letting a user work within, workbook A, but behind the scenes, when they're doing certain actions in the workbook they're working in via your add-in, behind the scenes, your add-in is also making Graph API calls, maybe to, add data from that workbook to another workbook or do actions in another workbook. So Graph API is certainly relevant to add-ins in that context. And if you haven't already done so, highly encourage you to check out the Graph Explorer that Joe was just showing us. It's a great way to get familiar with the API. And as you can see, from him demoing it today, it was just super quick and easy to play around with the API, plug in IDs and so forth, and just really get familiar with that API model. So if you haven't already checked it out, check it out and see how you can potentially leverage that in your Office add-ins. All right, next up we have Ricky Kirkham here. He's a senior dev writer on the Office platform team, and he's here to talk about some documentation tips and tricks for getting the most out of the docs. So Ricky, you can go ahead and share when you're ready.
All right, just a few tips here. I put the instructions for how to give feedback in the slide deck, just so you don't have to hunt through it through the recording. But I'll go straight to a demo. Here's a typical article in our help, and you'll see up here on the upper right, series of utility buttons. Depending on your form factor, there may or may not be labels on them. And this one is feedback. So if you want to give us feedback on an article, you can click this. It bounces you back down to the bottom of the page. Click this page. And I'm going to have to log in.
And while he does that, the reason he's logging in is because this feedback feature in our docs leverages GitHub. And so he'll walk you through how, adding feedback actually creates an issue in GitHub. But that's why he's logging in here. He's providing our docs platform with his connection to his GitHub account. Okay, since Ricky's having a little trouble with the authentication flow here, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and I'll walk you through. I'm already signed into GitHub on my machine. 1 second here. I'm just queuing things up here, guys. All right, here we go. Showing my screen here. Second. All right, so within any article here, I'll just jump into an article and I'll get us back to where Ricky was. So say I'm reading this article and I have some feedback. You notice I see the feedback word next to the little conversation icon here because the form factor is slightly different. So I'm going to click feedback like Ricky did, and we'll get back to where we were. I'm already signed in to GitHub. Actually, yeah. So I'll click this page and then oh, I'm not signed into GitHub. I'll sign in.
sense to.
All right, we'll get signed in. So I just completed that WAF flow to connect the docs.microsoft.com platform to my GitHub account. So now if I try to add feedback, and I'll let Ricky kind of talk you through from here.
Yeah, just write in any title there, test maybe.
Let's say I found a broken link in this article. I'll just title my issue broken link, the link to, and I'll give it a descriptive text here of what the issue is. It's important as you're doing this to give a good description because this is actually going to log a GitHub issue, so you want to be as specific as possible as what the issue was. So I'll do that, and then I'll click Submit Feedback.
Okay, so there your issue is logged. To see what it looks like to us when we're handling it, you can click the View on GitHub. And there it is as an issue in our GitHub repo where we can assign it to people, label it by category, respond to you, and hopefully get it solved and fixed.
Cool.
Now, another tip is how to see the history of changes. So if we press the back button back to our article, go back to the top. Best way to see the history of changes is to click that edit symbol there. And that again takes you to GitHub. And you'll see across the top kind of utility bar off to the right where it says raw blame history. You press history. That gives you a chronological listing in reverse order of the changes made to that particular article. And we try to maintain a system of naming these commits. It begins with, in brackets, the name of the host to which it applies. But in certain situations, we label it admin. So it might say bracket Excel if it was all about Excel, or bracket all, it's about all hosts. So there's how you can scroll through there and see the history of that article. Now, if you want to see the recent history of all the changes to the docs in the repo, you can click Pull Requests and then Closed. And that gives you the same kind of listing of recently closed PRs. Again, listed from the most recent first. That gives you a quick scan summary view of the various changes that have been made to various articles in the repo. Now for reference content, things work pretty much the same as far as creating an issue goes. In fact, it works exactly the same as far as creating the issue goes, except that you're in a different repo. Reference content is a different repo. One thing that's different about reference content, however, is that you cannot edit it. There's no edit control up at the top. The reference content is generated automatically from the source code. So there's really nothing there for you to edit.
Yep, so that's a good point. So you can't, while you can't edit it, you can still provide feedback in the same way that you did here. So I'm looking at the reference page right now for the Excel JavaScript API, and you see the feedback link here is still available. So if I wanted to give feedback on this page or any other page within the reference docs, I'd just go through the same process, click feedback. I can give feedback on this page, and that would add a create a GitHub issue and add it to the bottom of this page.
Okay, that's it for my tips. And we want to encourage you, by the way, to leave the feedback if you see a problem, no matter how small. We do want to get it fixed, and we depend on you to tell us about it.
Awesome, thanks, Ricky. Yeah, I think it's probably been a year or more, maybe almost a couple years ago. We moved our docs to be open source, and as part of doing that, all of our docs issues then automatically the feedback control is added to the bottom of each docs page like this, and it's a great way for you to provide feedback, help improve our docs along the way. One note here as well, as you see the link here at the bottom of the page where we created the issue a minute ago, you can expand here and see the dialogue. And so the integration between the docs platform and the GitHub repository where the doc source files live is ongoing. And so what I mean by that is as a conversation thread happens there in GitHub on this issue, you'll see the content here at the bottom of this docs page be updated. So it's an ongoing reflection of the conversation thread that's happening on GitHub for the issue. And so not only is this great way for you as an individual user to report issues with the docs and interact with us, but it's also a great way if you're looking at an article and you think you maybe see a problem with it, scroll down to the bottom and see maybe if there's already an issue that's been reported. You'll also see closed issues here, so there's no closed issues with this particular article, but if there were, there would be links here to the corresponding GitHub issues. So a great way for you to interact with us and help improve our docs, and so if you notice any problems with the docs, please feel free to provide feedback for us. One other note, the edit functionality that Ricky showed where you can jump into GitHub and see the history. The reason this is useful for a lot of folks is because we don't have a changelog for the docs, and so you don't necessarily, you have in the docs what you do have, you have a last updated date. And so at the top of each article, you'll see this article, for instance, was last updated May 7th of this year. But what you don't have is, okay, what actually changed on May 7th? We don't really know. So that's where the edit comes in handy. You can jump into GitHub, look at the history of this article. And if you're curious about what exactly changed, you're able to actually jump into in here and see what changed. And so occasionally that's useful, so just keep that in mind.
Kim, I don't think it should be necessary for them to have a GitHub account to leave feedback. So I think the fact that we were prompted to log in.
Yeah, some kind of, it actually is necessary.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, it actually is necessary. So hopefully, as developers, most of you already have GitHub accounts, but you definitely do have to authenticate with GitHub, because that's how the integration with GitHub between the docs platform and GitHub is facilitated. So you definitely do need a GitHub account in order to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Let me share the PowerPoint deck here. We'll get back to that. So the deck that we'll publish as part of the blog post contains a couple slides here that covers a lot of the points that Ricky made. So keep an eye out for that in the blog post. And that brings us to a great part of this call. We have Andrew Hall joining us from Analysis Place, and he's here to give us some insight into how his company has used Office add-ins to power their document automation solutions that provide Excel to Word and Excel to PowerPoint automation. So Andrew, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Kim, and hello, everybody. So my objective is to demonstrate our three solutions and then describe how we use Office.js to power those solutions, and then also to discuss some challenges and tips. So we are a small hosted solution provider, and we create document automation solutions, specifically Microsoft Office document updating and document generation. And we provide a single add-in that's added to Excel, Word, and/or PowerPoint. And that add-in is available through the Microsoft App Store. And it's a single add-in depending on what features the users have access in. So it's just a relatively large single-page application. And there are three parts to it. The first is a part that's for individual professionals, and it is the document automation add-in, both Excel to Word as well as Excel to PowerPoint. And then the second is for businesses, meaning where there are teams or organizations that have multiple users that want to use a managed Excel-based tool or Word or PowerPoint templates. So it's template-based document generation and how to enable managed Excel-based tools. And then the third solution is a set of APIs, a document generation service and a calculation service. So in general, what the add-in does is update content from Excel, so including content that's within single cells, which updates text within Word and PowerPoint, table content that's updated in that updates tables within Word and PowerPoint based on a range in Excel, and charts, both images as well as the native chart updating capability. So in general, what the add-in does is it links content once in a robust way so it can be shared with others, and then it allows you to update those documents many times after it's initially linked. So it's very common that people and organizations conduct assessments within Excel documents to do things like collect data, consolidate information, configure solutions, perform lookups, logic, calculations, analysis, etc. And then to want to take content, including text tables, graphs, and lists, to update content within things like proposals, assessment result reports, financial reports, data intensive contracts, etc. So here's just a couple examples. And before I demonstrate our solutions, I'll just quickly show you a brief history of Analysis Place. Is that up until a couple years ago, our document automation solutions were primarily VBA focused. And VBA has some advantages in the sense that it's easy to develop and it has full capabilities, but there are some significant security risks. And because of that, companies tend to not be willing to download VBA workbooks and use them internally to do things like update Word and PowerPoint documents. We also, for a while, used something called Excel Web Access, but since 2007, when Office add-ins were kind of broadly available, we focused on using Office add-ins for all of our solutions because it provides easy access. So that's critical because VBA, not all of the capabilities are available on Macs. And so that's a critical part of it, that it's a cross-platform. And when you publish to places like the Office Store, it's available to everybody. Just one small disadvantage of Office add-ins is that there are still some capability gaps. For example, there is not yet a full API for PowerPoint yet. And then on the back end, we've always used the Microsoft Stack, and we communicate between the front end and back end using standard REST-based web services. So the Microsoft Stack includes OpenXML, which is a critical part of our solution. We used to use SharePoint Excel Calculation Service, but we now use, this is what Joe presented earlier, the Excel Graph API. We also now use Azure. So the first solution for individual professionals focused on updating Word and PowerPoint content from Excel-based content. So within Excel, you name and list content and then submit the content so that content is available to both Word and PowerPoint. Then on the Word side, you link the content, which is within content controls, update the content within the add-in, and then in PowerPoint, you link shapes as opposed to content controls, and then you update content. But because PowerPoint doesn't have its own API, they're actually updated on our servers using OpenXML. So I will just demonstrate. So on the left side is Excel with our add-in open here. and just some sample content here. And I'm just going to make a change. So instead of 1 user, 1,000 users. And I'm going to submit that content. And basically what it's doing is that it's looking through the Excel document for any content, any named content that starts with this prefix, the RPT underscore in this case. So whether it's individual cells, which update text, tables, either tables or named ranges, which update tables within Word, or charts, which can either update images or charts within PowerPoint. So now that I submitted the content, it's available to Word, and I'm going to update the content. And you can see that the dynamic content on the Word side is updated to match the content that's that came from Excel. And it also allows you to do things like list the linkable content. And as I mentioned, to add content that you want to link, you simply name it. So there's different ways of doing that. You can either name it using the native way, or there's also some additional more sophisticated ways that we allow you to link content and manage them. So I'm just going to resubmit it so that new content is available. And then to add new content, there's also a variety of ways of doing that. But I'm just going to add in that new item. So I'm going to get the Excel content, and I added this text item, so I'm just going to insert it here, and you can see that it appears there. It also provides other ways of managing the content by listing the content that is linked. And you can just, for example, update specific content. So for example, if you have a very large document, like 100 pages, and you just want to update a portion of it, that allows you to do that. And just to explain very quickly how parts of this work. So to get the content, to get named ranges, and I'm oversimplifying this, but basically you get a named range, and then the range, and then the text within that range. For tables, within the workbook, you get a table, and then you get the range, and then the text. And those are within 2D arrays, is the data that you get back. And then for chart images, you select they're on worksheets. You select a chart on a worksheet, and then you get the image of the chart. On the Word side, to update the content, Office.js uses, because everything is in content controls, you select a content control, and the way that we do it is based on an ID that's part of that content control. You then insert the text to replace the existing content in that content control. And then for tables, you select the content control, a table within that content control, a row within the table, a cell within the row, and then update the value within that cell. And then for images, it's a content control, and then insert an inline picture from a base 64 data, and then you replace the existing image that might be in there. So updating with a Word is done within the add-in, but for PowerPoint, it works a little bit differently. Because there is no PowerPoint specific API, the add-in is used to help to link all of the content, but the actual updating is done on the server. So what it does is it uses get file async to get the open document and submits that to the server along with the data from Excel. It updates it on the server. It then allows you to download the updated PowerPoint. And so you can see that this is the updated content within that PowerPoint document. So the key point here is that it uses get file async to get the open PowerPoint document and then submits that to the server. And on the server, it uses OpenXML to manipulate the document, which uses C#. There is some limited capability to list content within the add-in within PowerPoint using to get the file using get file async, then unzip the content, and then you can view the OpenXML. But we found that there are some limitations to that. So we kind of limit to the extent to which we use and manipulate any OpenXML within the add-in. So solution 2, which is for businesses that want to have multiple users that use an Excel-based assessment tool and want to update documents or want to perform document generation based on templates. And secondly, then to manage those Excel-based tools. So it helps to deploy the tools and to manage them once they're deployed to multiple users. So the add-in, and I'm just going to switch back over to Excel here. So if you have the business features enabled, then users will also see this advanced tab or some other similarly named tab. And it simply allows the user to update documents based on a list. So in this case, there are two document templates have been uploaded to the server. And basically what the add-in does is that it gets the content out of the Excel document, submits it to the server, updates the template that's on the server, and then allows the user to download it. So it's a very convenient solution for organizations that want to deploy Excel-based tools to users and then allow them to create documents from templates. If you have administrator access, this is how you manage those. So Cloud Reports, it just allows the administrator to add new templates and then to upload the report template. And then once it's uploaded, then it becomes available to users and will show up as an additional template that they can choose and update. It also has a variety of other capabilities, which I'll not go into detail here, but things like version control, the ability to manage input cells and restore default values and formulas to protect the workbook, including things like sheets that you want to hide or side calculations. So it allows you to do a lot of other capabilities like that, all enabled by the add-in. And then our third solution is a set of APIs. The first one of those is template-based document generation. And basically it allows your app or system to send text, table, chart data, or images in a JSON format to our service, which runs on an Azure service, where your templates are stored. It updates those templates based on the data that you send. It then returns the updated Word or PowerPoint document. And then there's a second one, which is a calculation service. So again, your system or app submits data in the form of JSON. It uses an Excel template, and the template can be extensive. So there can be extensive logic within the Excel-based template. It performs calculations and creates graphs. It then returns the calculated data, text, tables, and charts back to your system to be used elsewhere. And then a third part of that is the combination of the two, where based on the data that you sent, it can perform calculations and then do things like create charts and then insert those into your document templates and then return those to you. So I'll show you just a couple of examples of what it looks like. So this is a website, a demonstration website to demonstrate those 3 APIs. And this first one, let's pretend that I want to quickly create invoices to sell cars that are, let's say, in my garage. So I'm just going to create the Word report. And what it's doing is that it's just sending JSON data to the server. It updates the document, and you can see that it's updated based on the changes that I made. And it also shows the data that's sent to the service, as well as the data that it sends back. So this first one is just the document generation service. The second one is the calculation service. So what this one does is that it sends some data to the service, and then it returns a graph and some calculations related to retirement savings. So in this case, I'm going to say, instead of starting my savings at age 40, I'm going to start at age 50. And so it's sending that the change that I made to the reporting, or to the calculation service. It's performing the calculations. It then returned the results. So it says, oops, this plan will only provide income to age 74, and provides a graph. And here is the data that returned. And it was very easy to create these. Let me just show you the third one, where it is the combination. So in this case, I'm going to create a PowerPoint report. And these APIs in themselves don't require the add-in, because it's just between a customer system and our service. But what sets these APIs apart is that it uses the add-in to configure and test the solutions. So this API tab shows how it's done. So it allows you to do things like upload the templates. So that's the Word and PowerPoint templates, as well as the workbook calculator templates. It allows you to test the templates, and also displays the JSON based on the data that's in the workbook that you have open. And because it displays the exact format of the data that you need to use in your service, you can just basically kind of copy and paste that JSON into your application. In this case, I'm just using JavaScript to do that, but it could be any language. And basically what I did is I just started off by pasting that data into here and then manipulating it.
A quick time check. We have just a few minutes left, so maybe if you want to jump to go through the last couple pretty quickly, that'd be great.
Yep. Okay. So just some challenges that we've had: transition from VBA to Office.js. It's just a different way of programming, and just takes some getting used to. VBA is real quick to get started and publish the solution, but once you do that the first time in Office.js, it then becomes easy to do that. We've also had some challenges about the app-to-app communication and client-to-server, but once those issues are ironed out, it always becomes consistent. And just a couple tips: I recommend using TypeScript, which we do not, but it's just because we got started before TypeScript was used commonly. And I also recommend using Script Lab to initially see how different things are done, and then test them in Script Lab, and then use the code for your own solution. Thank you. Back to you, Kim.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. Just real quick while I share my screen here, just a really great example of a really robust Office integration, not only using Office add-ins as the basis for the integration, but also using OpenXML, using the Graph API. Really cool to see. A lot of times you see Office add-ins that operate basically facilitate functionality within a single host application like Excel or Word. But it's really cool to see this capability, this type of use case where an Office add-in is facilitating integration between multiple hosts. So that's very awesome. Thanks, Andrew, for sharing. So we're almost to the top of the hour here. We'll wrap up pretty quickly. First of all, if you're interested in presenting like Andrew just did and like others have in recent months, please fill out the Office Add-ins Engage form and submit that to us, and we'll reach out to you and talk about your idea for presentation. Likewise, if you just want to provide us feedback about the docs or even feedback about the Office Add-ins platform, feel free to reach out this way as well. We've had a little trouble with Teams today. Doug's been unable to successfully post links in the chat window. So the chat window doesn't seem to be working today. If you've tried to type questions in, we apologize. We haven't been receiving those questions. I'll tell you what, instead of, in lieu of using the chat window, go ahead and submit your questions using this link, aka.ms/office add-ins form. If you want to submit any questions you have via that form, we'll make sure we answer them in the blog post that we'll publish here in a couple days to recap the call. So thank you for joining us today. The recording will be available soon on the Office Developer YouTube channel. Our next call, as I mentioned earlier, is second Wednesday of July 10th. And feel free to submit your questions in advance for that call as well. And if you don't already have the invite, go ahead and add it to your calendar. So thanks everyone for joining us today, and thanks to all the presenters, and we look forward to seeing you next month.